Welcome everyone! Today we're going to defeat Germany as France in Hearts of Iron 4 as fast as possible. Actually, we're going to do a lot more than just that. Our main goal for this run is bringing back the monarchy, taking plenty of land in the meantime and dismantling Germany in order to play as Prussia. If that's not your cup of tea, don't worry, I'll also show you everything you need to know to rule the world as the French Empire in 1938. The requirements for this run are pretty straightforward. In order to release and play as Prussia, we need to reinstate the monarchy in France and conquer Germany. Since that's pretty boring for the most part, I've included some worthwhile side quests in this run, because there's unfortunately plenty of waiting involved if we only go for Prussia. The main thing that's holding us back is, as usual, the focus tree. Dismantling Germany, the focus that we're after, is located deep into the monarchist branch of the tree and includes a full 365-day long break that we cannot bypass. But other than time, there are only a few requirements that we need to meet when we get to the actual focus. We have to have control over German territory and France needs to be independent. That's pretty much it. As per usual, I will try to explain everything that's happening on the fly, but there might be times where I have to pause the game in order to get into the details of some mechanics or strategy. Anyway, enjoy! I've recorded this run in version 1.11 with Iron Man, historical AI and no mods enabled. I'm playing with all DLCs, but only La Resistance is a must-have. Together for Victory helps quite a bit and is a requirement to play as Prussia. Whacking the Tiger is also beneficial, but only in regards to the upcoming side quests. After loading into the game, we begin our setup by selecting Electronic Mechanical Engineering and Paratroopers as our research. The Paratroopers won't be ready in time for our war against Germany, but are going to prove useful later on. We throw some military factories into the building queue, but feel free to do as you please here. Our production capabilities early on are the Achilles heel of France, but we're going to make do with what we got. First we remove motorized and tank production as well as a bunch of naval production lines. When I recorded this run, I wanted to have paratroopers as a last resort if I mess up the war against Germany on the ground. In turn, I committed 4 military factories to the production of transport planes. Don't do that unless you don't feel comfortable winning the war with micro after watching this video. Better use them for equipment production and make some transport planes later. Our fuel tanks aren't full enough to carry us through the upcoming war, which is why we need to import some oil. The first focus we select, called Revive the National Bloc, will put us on a path towards monarchy or fascism. Now on to our ground forces. We put all units into a single army and split up our divisions by type afterwards, meaning one army each for tanks, colonial infantry, mountaineers, cavalry, motorized and infantry. We expand our tank army with 4 additional infantry divisions and station them at the border to the most northern French province. The infantry army is going to cover the border with the Rhineland DMZ, while our colonial divisions are going to support our tank army and stage a naval invasion into northern Germany. To expand our options, we are pre-planning another naval invasion from Kiel across the Baltic Sea. You can chain up naval invasions like this from any country if you target them with naval invasions beforehand. There's still a small part of the border unguarded, so let's assign our mountaineers to fill the gap. Our cavalry divisions are staying behind in preparation of the French Civil War. France starts with quite a few motorized divisions and they are going to play a key role in our campaign against Germany. Before I go more in depth about the placement of our armies, we're going to wrap up the setup first. We select all ships and bring them to northern France and gather all air wings as well. France starts off with plenty of territory abroad that faces resistance, but we cannot spare any equipment for that. So we can either release them as puppets or disable garrison completely, which is what I went with. We're nevertheless going to be short on equipment. Deleting a few divisions should fix that. Now that we're done with the setup, let's talk strategy while we wait for the research swap. Right now we have more divisions than Germany, but this advantage is going to decrease rapidly because of Germany's better industrial capabilities. In order to profit from these early game circumstances, we're going to challenge the remilitarization of the Rhineland, which is Germany's first focus on historical. On top of superior numbers on the ground, France of course also features a larger fleet, allowing us to not only attack through the Maginot Line but also across the North Sea. The most important advantage we have is the element of surprise. AI Germany isn't prepared for Rhineland being challenged. Most of their divisions are scattered around the country on a mix of garrison and frontline orders. This means if we push through the currently unmanned border here, we won't face any resistance until Germany has relocated some divisions. This is very important in order to profit from our numerical advantage. We need to extend the front lines as much as possible to force Germany to stretch thin, leave gaps in the front line and make mistakes while redeploying. That's also the primary reason for our naval invasion. The longer the front lines, the better for us. At the end of January, when the empty research slot has buffered to its 30-day maximum, we swapped the paratrooper research for MP support and put it into the unused slot instead to speed up the research by 30 days. Since we're not going to use them early, this was kind of unnecessary. I should have sped up MP support instead, since that's what's actually needed ASAP. I won't comment on research further, since paratroopers and MP support are the only ones that matter for us. On March 11, our first focus finishes, and so does Germany's, triggering the event chain for Rhineland, which gives us two options. We either consider that an act of war or back down and issue a formal protest. Of course, we're choosing the former despite risking a civil war and receiving a massive hit to political power and stability. What follows now is a sequence of decisions that are bounced back and forth between the player and the AI. By selecting the first option, we request support from the United Kingdom. If they agree, we automatically join the Allies. Unfortunately for our case, the odds that Germany will go to war over Rhineland with the UK backing us is pretty much zero. That's why we want Britain to deny our request for support, since it increases the chances for Germany to opt for war immensely. If the UK backs down, we get the opportunity to do the same, but we instead stand firm on challenging Germany. If all goes according to plan, the war against Germany as well as the French Civil War break out immediately after. I'll talk a bit about the numbers behind the event chain later. After selecting Utilize the Leaks as our next focus, it's finally time to dive into some micromanagement. The Civil War took away 25% of our divisions, equipment, ships and planes. Our organization also took a serious blow. The renegade province in northern France is the only relevant part of this civil war. As soon as we've dealt with it, the communists will surrender. But pushing into Germany is the most crucial step right now. Our motorized divisions are key in this situation. Anything north of these 3 German divisions is currently not guarded and wide open. That's why we are pushing as aggressively as possible to gain as much ground as possible before our push gets interrupted by redeploying German divisions. As you most likely know, terrain plays a crucial role in movement and combat, and rivers are particularly hard to cross if they are defended. That's why we aim to extend the front line along the Rhine to the north, while simultaneously making a mad dash along the River Main towards Czechoslovakia. There are plenty of opportunities to cross both rivers and march even deeper into enemy territory, but that leaves our divisions vulnerable to counterattacks. You won't be able to win this war fast if you don't know how to micromanage divisions. Executing battle plans will utterly fail due to how they work. Our motorized divisions prove invaluable here. We are using them to secure favorable positions for us, but most importantly to create a long front line. But they aren't ideal to defend a position. That's where our infantry comes into play. Unfortunately, infantry is rather slow, which makes it even more important to manually send them to where we need them the most, if necessary even with strategic redeployment. The first enemy divisions usually show up around Cologne, right about when our motorized divisions are zipping past on the opposite side of the river. Sometimes they attack straight across, sometimes they don't. Either way, it's imperative to reinforce the river line with proper infantry quickly. Our push around the Siegfried line is making the divisions there quite nervous. They are trying to abandon their position in order to not get cut off, but we'll pin them down to prevent a retreat before we can encircle them. So far we haven't seen much of the Germans, but that's about to change. Luckily we're close to securing the western bank of the Rhine and make decent progress along the Main. Now we need to fortify our positions and create havoc in Bavaria. Why there? Well, it's the furthest away from reinforcements, and it's actually only connected to the rest of Germany through a small 2-tile wide choke point. That might sound trivial, but has significant implications on how we utilize our divisions. We can allocate the vast majority of our forces to the river line and the escalating battle at the choke point. Our skirmish with the French communists is developing slowly but surely in our favor, but it is still going to take a couple days more until we actually defeat them. Meanwhile, we will have to deal with the increasing number of German divisions at the front line. At the moment, we still have pretty much free range in the south, but there are more divisions showing up around Nuremberg every day. After they've secured the eastern bank of the Rhine, and have been reinforced by infantry, we are deleting the motorized divisions that led the charge here. This allows us to set our armies to motorized supply. We've managed to encircle the German divisions at the Siegfried line and are going to keep them in place with our mountaineers. Meanwhile, we are trying to continue our push east towards Munich. We are at a critical point now. We have to bring the French Civil War to an end quickly to relieve the rising pressure on our divisions in Germany. We managed to stall their divisions around Nuremberg, but our advance has come to a stop as well. At the moment we are mostly trying to hold the current front line and make use of our defensive positions behind rivers. 10 days into the war, we managed to put an end to the communist uprising, send our tanks over to the starting grounds for the naval invasion, and bring the other divisions over to the Rhineland to relieve the army that's led by de Gaulle. All of our ships plus air wings get us barely over 50% naval supremacy. You can increase your chances by building an agency and gathering navy intel beforehand. Our divisions embark in 2 waves towards the German coast. By now, the German AI abandoned all garrison orders in favor of stopping us from advancing, leaving the coast vulnerable. Our reinforcements arrive in the Rhineland while the invasion is still on its way. This allows us to concentrate our main army around Frankfurt and Nuremberg. When our divisions land in northern Germany, they don't encounter any resistance at first, just as we've planned for. We have to now push out aggressively without overcommitting. Meanwhile, we closely monitor for enemy divisions moving away from the front line to force a breakthrough wherever we see an opportunity to do so. After the push that followed the naval invasion has been stopped as well, the real grind begins. By breaking through just east of Frankfurt and west of Munich, we can pick up our initial goal of marching towards Czechoslovakia again and encircle the defending divisions in Bavaria. At this point, the German army is in complete disarray. They aren't able to cover the front line anymore. Direct combat is still something we want to avoid, but we can now swallow the rest of the German forces piece by piece. It's all about creating encirclements without overextending. The more pockets and individual front lines we create, the more we have to watch out for redeployment errors on our side. If not for the preparation bonus, I wouldn't use front lines at all here. We are 1 month into the war and it's becoming apparent that we are going to end up victorious. All that's left now is cleaning up the mess and pushing Germany below the surrender limit. When we challenge the militarization of the Rhineland as France, the chances for the UK joining are 50-50. The check for Germany backing down if the UK is with us is rather complex and leads to near impossible odds for Germany to keep insisting. But the case that interests us, meaning Germany going to war over this against France alone, is again just 50-50. So 2 dice rolls with 50-50 odds, or 25%, or 1 in 4 attempts. It's as simple as that. But enough of that, let's get back to our campaign. We're halfway into May of 1936, 2 months into the war. I think with a little bit more energy and attention span, I could have wrapped this up a bit earlier, but it was late and I was rather tired at this point and just wanted to bring it home safely. On the 17th of May, Germany surrenders. You can choose to keep Germany or parts of it as a puppet, but that will cause you problems later down the line if you also want to do the upcoming side quests. That's why we straight up annex everything. Looks better like that anyway. After the peace conference is over, we set our garrison law to local police force, delete our armies and prioritize resupply for garrisons. The focus, utilize the leaks, finishes soon after, which we follow up with the Council of Rambouillet. The problem, at least for me, is that there isn't much happening for a long time now if we just want to beeline it towards the French monarchy and releasing Prussia. The focus time alone isn't so bad, but after we finish repeal the law of exile, we have to endure a mandatory break of a full year until we can progress along the path any further. If you're eyeballing the fascist path, don't get your hopes up either. It also takes quite a while to build up the necessary requirements. Unfortunately, all that talk about options and different paths doesn't change the fact that there's literally nothing to do for a long time, since we're still democratic. And if you've seen my other videos, you know that waiting isn't something that I enjoy very much. Well, there's at least one thing we can do. I just mentioned that we're still democratic and will remain so for quite some time. In most situations, if you're looking for early aggression that is, being a democratic nation is pretty much the worst option. We can't justify any war goals, and the focus tree doesn't provide any war goals for the foreseeable future either. But we can dish out guarantees, since annexing Germany brought world tension beyond the needed threshold of 25%. Guarantees will cost us political power, and the low daily gain means that it will take months to recover from the hit that we took during the Rhineland events. For now, we are stuck with research, production and building a new army. After finishing the MP support research, we make a copy of our cavalry template, remove recon support and replace it with MP. We then use all of our army experience to add more cavalry companies and use the new division template for garrison duties. Now that the Council of Rambouillet is done, we can move on to revise the constitution. Our new army is going to consist of 3 different division templates. The first 2 are infantry, the third is going to be paratroopers. The sole difference between the infantry templates is that one has recon support and is going to be used for offense, the other one does not and is going to be used for defense. The 365-day-long mandatory break begins as soon as Revise the Constitution has finished. We're going to pick Begin Rearmament next for the additional military factories, but won't select a new focus after that until we can continue towards a French monarchy. We instead bank political power, which we will need quite a lot of in the future. Since we're just recruiting and training divisions at the moment, let's fast forward for a month, up until the point where the Spanish Civil War breaks out. Spain is of course not the side quest we've been talking about, we want to fry bigger fish. And since we're already on the topic of fixing historical mistakes, let's continue with that and guarantee China. The UK is already doing so, but they'll retract as soon as the Chinese United Front forms. We're playing on historical and therefore know that Japan will go to war with China in July of 1937. That gives us plenty of time to scale our army to what we need. We aim for a full army of offensive infantry, 1.5 armies of defensive infantry, and a full army of 2 with paratroopers. We already control territory in Asia, which makes sending divisions over in advance quite easy. Just make sure you don't send them too late, the travel time is quite long. After they've arrived, we assign a field marshal and generals, and make sure that all our armies are on fully motorized supply. On the 15th of July, Japan declares war as expected. This triggers our guarantee, allowing us to jump to their aid immediately. We then wait until Japan also declares on another Chinese warlord, pause the game and ask every Chinese nation for military access. They happily accept and we go ahead and assign our forces. Our main army, led by Charles de Gaulle, is leading the charge while another army is providing support. The remaining 12 defensive infantry divisions are tasked with defending ports against naval invasion attempts by the Japanese. We are not involving our fleet in this conflict since we cannot afford to lose any ships. That's why we need to actively defend ports. It's also going to cost us some convoys, but not enough to matter. Despite already having military access, we're also going to join the Chinese United Front. It's better for supply and we also get access to their ports and airfields. Gaining military access first is mostly useful as an easy avenue into another side quest later on. After the French divisions have reinforced the defensive line around Beijing, we give the Japanese time to deplete their organization. Keep an eye out for this tile here. The divisions there are usually the first to run out of orc, and the tile is also important for a quick advance eastwards. A river crossing is coming up one tile behind it, and if we don't want to get stuck, we need to push the Japanese across the river and follow them on their heels to not allow them to regain organization. Getting across that river is one thing, but capturing the port that's located there is equally important, if not more. Japan has access to only 3 ports, and the area in general is already famous for its bad supply situation. But since that applies to us as well, we want to spearhead along the coast and into occupied Korea with as much force and speed as necessary to never allow the Japanese to build up entrenched defensive lines, especially not behind rivers. I again only micromanage divisions and don't execute the frontline orders. I'm only using them so that the AI balances the divisions across the 2 front lines that I'm constantly adjusting. The army led by de Gaulle is always supposed to be concentrated at the very tip of the spear. We use every opportunity to push into undefended tiles and only pin hostile divisions for now to stop them from interfering with our advance. The other army's sole purpose is to keep the corridor back to Beijing open. Never trust the AI to do this job for you properly. We reach another river crossing 1.5 months into the war, and it looks like we have to fight for this one. Or not. The front line is too long and too sparsely manned for the AI to handle, which leads to holes in the line everywhere. We simply march past, spread out, and focus on the next 2 objectives. capturing the second of the 3 Japanese ports on the mainland and crossing yet another river. Surprisingly, we can take the port without a fight. Usually there's at least 1 division on guard and possibly more trying to pass through. Getting on the other side of this river here requires a little more effort, but since we're not allowing the Japanese divisions to catch a breath, it just takes a little more time until we make it across. The port at the southern tip of the Korean peninsula is now the only connection that Japan has left to its forces on the mainland. For us, that means that we want to push to the other side of the peninsula fast to cut off the Japanese forces before moving south towards the actual port. There's still going to be some resistance, but nothing serious. If you nevertheless get stuck, you can use the paratroopers to mess with the Japanese supply lines. Just make sure that you can reinforce with proper divisions in time before they get overrun. In October 1937 we can finally continue our path towards a French monarchy and select Repeal the Law of Exile as our next focus. Although it doesn't quite look like it yet, the war in Asia is going to end soon. Time to focus our attention back to Europe. Because if you want to keep the aggression up, there is ample room to do so, which is why we recruit new divisions and delete our defensive army to get the equipment and manpower back. After securing the majority of the region in the southern part of the Korean peninsula, we begin constructing an airfield there. When November comes around, we've taken most of the peninsula and our divisions and recruitment are ready to be deployed. We used them to stage naval invasions into Sicily and create a defensive line in the mountains. Just a few more days and Japan has been fully pushed back from all ports and its remaining forces are completely cut off. We now take our paratroopers and move them to the newly constructed airfield, which is still being upgraded. The first tiles that we target with paratrooper orders are the Japanese ports. We need to secure at least 1 to send our army across. Make sure to use 2 divisions or more for those jumps, so that they have a chance to hold that tile until our army arrives. The remaining paras are going to take as much of the territory that's in range. We don't have air superiority yet, but after our airfield is upgraded again, it can accommodate all of our planes, pushing us beyond the needed 70% for our paratrop orders to go through. Let's pause right here and talk about Italy for a second. I won't include them in this run since the video is already quite long, but I wanted to at least show you what options you have. For whatever reason, Italy does something funny when we release Germany as a puppet now. They immediately join Japan's faction and the war against us soon after. If Germany exists prior, Italy will join the war against us even earlier, right about when we go to war with Japan, or after making landfall on their home islands. We can use this opportunity to invade Sicily now and attack into Italy later, after Japan has fallen. It can sometimes be quite nasty to take that island last, while Italy itself usually isn't posing a challenge. The only problem to overcome is the initial defensive line in the mountains. You can either bait them out of their entrenched position and push them beyond the mountains, or use paratroopers to create redeploy chaos. We aren't doing any of that though. Instead, we used the divisions in Europe to prepare naval invasions into the United Kingdom. Releasing Germany isn't ideal at this point, since we would need to annex them again through the autonomy system before we could dismantle them. It is certainly possible, and we also have the political power for it, but it still delays our actual goal. Now back to our campaign. Our paratroopers have successfully taken a port next to Osaka, and we send our army over immediately to secure it permanently. Taking the Japanese home islands is a bit tedious, but they don't stand a chance once we've made landfall with our army. Speed is again pretty important. Make sure to never get bogged down somewhere for too long. The Japanese don't have many divisions left, but the home islands are narrow and full of choke points. With Repeal the Law of Exile out of the way, we get access to the 3 different monarchist branches of France. We stay on our chosen path and select Proclaim the Third Empire next. The peace conference fires at the end of December. In case you intend to keep playing as France throughout the campaign, puppeting Japan and annexing them for their fleet later would be a good move now. We don't do that and instead just grab as much territory as we can and leave the Japanese puppets for China. There's enough time before our next war for our divisions in Asia to travel back to Europe, but we won't need any more paratroopers, so we delete them and add more divisions to recruitment. As soon as Proclaim the Third Empire has finished, we flip to the non-aligned ideology with Napoleon VI as our leader. But the next focus, Avenge Waterloo, is what we're really after. It will result in war goals on the UK, Belgium and the Netherlands. The only issue right now is low manpower. We could fix that quite easily by upgrading recruitment laws, but we still want to bank political power. In order to not run dry, we deploy a couple fewer divisions than planned. Now that we are no longer democratic and world tension is beyond 50%, we can justify war goals. If you want to continue as France, I recommend you justify on Luxembourg or a Chinese warlord. Declaring on Luxembourg is going to lead to a faction between them and the United States. A war goal on a Chinese warlord allows you to execute Order 66 due to the military access that we still have. In order for that to work, you need to pump out plenty of divisions and cover all Chinese territory in garrison orders. Well, not all. You need to leave the nation that you justify on without divisions, otherwise you won't be able to declare on them. The focus event with Waterloo is about to finish, so let's finalize our preparations. We've built airfields in close proximity of the UK's dominion, and with the help of bombers we're going to damage some buildings in Canada, New Zealand, Australia, British Malaya and the Dutch East Indies. That way they'll get some war score and will be up for grabs during the peace conference after the United Kingdom capitulates. The only country that we won't be able to reach is South Africa. If you want to take them out as well in the upcoming war, stage a small naval invasion from Madagascar in order to suffer some casualties or hold a tile of their territory. We then split up our fleet and cover the North Sea with naval invasion support orders. Next we assign 10 divisions, which is the current maximum, to our naval invasion plans, delete some more divisions to combat our low manpower, and preemptively execute the invasion orders. As soon as Avenge Waterloo is done, we pause the game and declare war on the Netherlands. Immediately after the United Kingdom and its dominion joined the war, our invasion leaves port for Britain. The key to the North Sea is using both your fleets as well as your bombers, but it's just barely enough, which is why we didn't want to lose any ships back in Asia. By unassigning the 10 divisions that just left the port in Wilhelmshaven, we can assign another batch of 10, since the game doesn't recognize unassigned units as part of our maximum capacity for divisions in our naval invasion orders. We can do this again and again as long as we retain naval supremacy. That way we can send off all 24 divisions pretty much at the same time. For all of you that want to continue playing as Monarchist France, I highly recommend hiring the Backroom Stabber for 150 political power. The modifier Subversive Activity Costs actually reduces justification time and costs by 25%, as demonstrated here with Luxembourg. But don't justify now, wait until after the war since world tension is about to rise to 100%, reducing the justification time even more. After our divisions made landfall in Britain, it's crucial to spread out and take a port quickly. Luckily, the United Kingdom is barely defended. They will launch naval invasions through the channel though, and can reach Paris if we aren't careful. That's why we've got some divisions stationed in northern France. Despite them being a minor nation, we need to capitulate the Netherlands to avoid complications. We are going to be able to annex them during the upcoming peace conference either way, but if we don't force a surrender, there's a chance that the Dutch East Indies break free and continue to stay at war with us. After that's been taken care of and our divisions have moved to the front line with Belgium, we declare war on them as well. Britain is largely under our control at this point. Now it's just a matter of taking the last remaining high-value victory points to make them surrender. The peace conference kicks off on the 23rd of May and doesn't come with any surprises. We got everything that we came for. Only South Africa got away, which means they are the new faction leader of the Allies now. A faction with no other members, but still. To prevent that, you can leave Belgium untouched, for example. They are considered stronger by the game and are going to be rewarded faction leadership instead. After the conference is over, we delete all divisions and begin crippling the French Empire in anticipation of backstabbing ourselves as Prussia. But first, let's take a last gaze upon our empire before we ruin it all. If you don't want to do that, let's sum up our options one last time. We are still guaranteeing Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia and Romania, and Italy will go to war with Yugo sooner or later. As mentioned before, we also still have military access to all the Chinas and can easily attack and take out the United States by coming down from the north and invading from the Bahamas. You can also choose to never leave the Chinese United Front and use their help against the Soviets. Forming a faction with Poland or Greece is also an option, but you need to dismantle Germany in that case beforehand, since you won't be able to create factions otherwise. Now on to the final steps of our campaign. After finishing the very useful Retribution of Sedan, which provides us with a war goal on a non-existing country, we finally go for Disunite Germany. It is possible to skip Retribution for Sedan completely, but we need to be in the same faction as Germany, which only works if we release them and remain in the CUF. There are multiple ways to cripple a nation, but we are looking for a way that does not include destroying our stockpile. Instead, we use our army experience to make a heavy tank template. We don't have any of those in stock, and producing enough of them to field even a single division will take the AI a very long time. Without wars or passive gain from advisors, the AI won't have any army experience to create new templates as well. After creating the template, we select it for garrison duties and delete all other templates. We need to do this before Disunite Germany is done, since the newly created nations are going to inherit our templates. With Germany now carved up into kingdoms, we can use the massive amount of convoys that we have to quickly lower the autonomy of Prussia through Lend-Lease. We need to do this twice. Once to lower their autonomy level and another time to actually annex them. The first step costs us 50 political power, the second one 300. We still have some political power left, which we now use to downgrade to Disarmed Nation and to hire the nuclear scientist. Time to make the switch. We now release and play as the Kingdom of Prussia. If you expected any form of flair to it, forget about it. Prussia comes as bare bones as it gets, with generic leader, generic focus tree, only political advisors and no high command whatsoever. We also inherit none of the research we've done as France. At least you can build up your own high command from scratch since NSB. Since we're also stuck with only the heavy tank template now, we go for army effort. The 5 army experience we get from it are enough to create a new template, but first we justify on the French Empire. The few military factories that we have are enough to pump out a couple 2-width cavalry divisions. If you want to be smart about it and build military factories earlier, in what's going to be Prussia later, I have bad news for you. All building slots get reset once Germany is dismantled. Our war goal is ready on March 18th, 1939. We immediately declare war and make our way towards French victory points and into the territories of its German puppets. As you can see, crippling France beforehand worked wonders, and does so in any other scenario that involves breaking free from an overlord, just in case you want to play as a chunky Scotland early on, for example. On the 21st of April, the French Empire surrenders without a single casualty on either side. I don't intend on continuing and simply annex everything. Puppeting parts of France to get your hands on their fleet later would obviously be the better move for a campaign that goes beyond this point. Et voila! Prussia is now a superpower spanning across all continents. We have a large stockpile of equipment to work with, but since we don't get cores even in Germany, managing resistance is going to be a pain. That's why releasing puppets is pretty much a must if you want to continue playing as Prussia. And that's it. I really hope that you enjoyed the speedrun commentary and maybe even learned something new about the game along the way. I have plenty of ideas for this channel and strategies to showcase, so if you haven't already, feel free to subscribe and tag along. Thank you very much for watching, stay safe and have a great day.